I'm Andrew Can, and if I can, you can too. I am so excited for today's stream because we are going to be discussing YouTube title and thumbnails. Now, this is a very important combination because if you do not know, if people don't click on your thumbnails, it doesn't matter how good the video is. If they don't click on the video, it won't matter because it's those first piece of information that really matter in getting people to click to watch through to your video. So today I'm going to be reviewing some thumbnail submissions from you, as well as discussing some thumbnail design I've learned a little bit more recently. I'm really excited because I had a unique opportunity to learn directly from YouTube at my work. And so I'm going to use some of those learnings and bring them here today. I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Dimmy, Paul, Doug, and of course, Aaron Become a Prime. I see a lot of my moderators have showed up, but I'm really excited today because when it comes to YouTube, I feel that the thumbnail piece is a piece that everyone talks about, but there's not a lot of guidance on good thumbnails because a lot of time it comes down to who YouTube is serving the thumbnail to. So for me, I can give you an opinion, but my opinion could be flat out wrong, and your thumbnail could have a million impressions with a 10% click through rate. Now, there are a lot of numbers when it comes to impressions and click through rate. So while people start coming in today, I'm going to be showing off in YouTube Analytics some of those points so that you get a better idea of what exactly people are really kind of discussing when it comes to these things. Because if you don't understand how important it is, you can get lost in all the data there is, and YouTube is definitely filled with data. So that is where we're going to come in and just go deeper. And I see that Aaron has noticed that my shirt pocket, just in case anyone is wondering, it is in fact In and Out, California resident here, so got to support In and Out. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and make sure that we can kind of go from here, and then we are going to take a deeper look at what to expect, at least when it comes, to just how YouTube looks at impressions. Click. Interesting. No sound. Audio went out. Don't know what happened there. Hopefully, I am back. We will see together. So sometimes audio leaves, sometimes it comes back. Hopefully, my audio is back. I do see that. I see that audio is gone. Okay, it is back. Sometimes you do nothing, and sometimes it comes back. So, good afternoon. Good to see everyone. Good to see you, Dewey Jones. Just having a little bit of fun. So today we are going to be discussing how you can find your impressions click through rate. So the first thing I always recommend doing is coming. There's no headshot, I'm just screen recording, so that is on purpose. So the reason we're doing this is I want to show you where you can find your impressions click through rate in your YouTube analytics. So go to your YouTube channel homepage. We're going to click on your icon here. We're going to go into YouTube Studio. Another way you can do this is by clicking on Manage Videos here. So just giving you two options of ways that you can get to where we're trying to go today. So while we're here, I want to go ahead and just let you know that you can see your videos here. You can click on Dashboard, which will take you to the front page of your dashboard. Again, I'll zoom in just so this is a little more clear. Hopefully you guys can see that a little bit better. Once you're on your YouTube channel dashboard, you're going to want to go into your analytics, which you can click on the left-hand side here. So you're going to go to the dashboard and analytics. And this is important today because when I do the reviews, I want to make sure that we are using as much data you have as possible. And so by doing this, we're going to make sure that we can see the data for videos individually and as our channel as a whole. So on the analytics, we're going to go ahead and click. Now, one of the things I recommend doing is minimizing this side here. You're going to get an idea of, this is on my gaming channel, I'm using that as the example. what I always recommend people is when they want to see their performance, you can do it in the month you're currently in. You can do it on the last month. I recommend the last 90 days just to get an idea of how your channel's done over those last 90s. Again, this is on my gaming channel, so it is a little bit different. So if I go ahead from here, we're going to have it set to last 90, but I also want to make sure we click on advanced mode. A lot of people get afraid of their YouTube analytics. I don't want you to be too afraid. I want you to be okay with being in the YouTube analytics. I'm back on screen because I think this is a very important part. YouTube analytics are not as scary as people think they are. People will be so afraid to go and dive deep, but I promise you, within them is some of the best parts about YouTube as a platform and as a service, and you really can understand how YouTube is seeing these things. And when I had the conversation with a person who was working at YouTube, I asked a couple of questions, although mostly I was listening. I feel that a lot of times it is just as important to listen as it is to make sure you're actively, asking. So from here, where we're going to go is advanced mode. So in advanced mode, we're going to get our videos. Now, for today, what I want us to focus on is instead of views by video, which is in this little section here, again, making sure I can make this as obvious as possible, we are going to go ahead and click and make sure that we have selected the right area. So we're going to go to impressions click through rate. And what this is going to do is give us a little bit of this data in a different way. You can choose to view it in what makes the most sense for you. You can sort it by views, you can sort it by impressions, you can sort it by any different ways. And if you want to, you just click down here and it will sort by which one gets the most impressions. So what I've done is I've clicked impressions and it'll tell us the impressions and then the click through rate per the videos themselves, right? So the reason I show this is it's important to understand what an impression is. So as it says here, an impression is how many times your video thumbnails were shown to viewers. This includes only impressions on YouTube, so it's not going to include external websites or apps. So this is just based on YouTube itself. But this gives you a good idea because a thumbnail earning an impression means that a user, a audience member, someone who will watch your content has seen it for at least 1 second. So the reason this is important is because you need to understand that I can have an incredibly high click-through rate. I've seen in click-through rates up to 100%, but they had one impression, meaning that only one person saw it. So the problem with that is if you have only one person seeing your thumbnail and they happen to click through, you have an inaccurate 1%. One person viewed it, so you got 100% click through. Now, when you start seeing it to scale, right? This is over the last 90 days. You start to see that the impressions here, well, this is 15,000, so 10.7% click through, meaning that this is a pretty solid thumbnail when it comes to how people are reacting to it comparatively. Another thing you can do is you can hover here to see your thumbnail, get an idea. A lot of people don't know how to look at it in this way. So all I'm doing is focusing on my impressions click-through rate. In fact, if you want, you can remove metrics from this table. You can hide a metric. So if you don't really care about a metric, you can hide it just to focus on what's probably the most important for this. So that is something I recommend doing. You can also add it back the same way, just to give it, if you want to see, you can add in average view duration. Maybe that is something you're really passionate about. You want to see, how much people are watching from it. You can, of course, hide the same way. Maybe not on this one, hide metric. But if all we want to focus on is the impressions click through rate, that's something that's super important. And of course, if you look at average view duration, that tells you how they respond once they actually click through and watch. So this is just how you get there. And understanding this, I'm going to be asking you when it comes to the review time, what are the number of impressions that video got? What is its click through rate? Another way to get there, so I will come back on screen. Another way to get there is through an individual video's analytics. So let's go ahead and focus on that now. And now let's get there. So to get there, we're just going to go back, click on the close here in the top right-hand corner. We're going to go to the video we want to check out. For me, let's go ahead and check out this older video. I want to see why it's doing so well. So we're going to click here. We're going to click on the last 90 days. I see this from Driving with Miles. I will once we cover how to look at impressions click-through rates, because I want to know how the data is being there when I take a look at the thumbnail. So it's not just looking at it, I want to know with data. So when I ask you for which thumbnail you want me to look at, I also need you to go ahead and get the data, because if I don't know that, then I'm just giving you my opinion without an informed data. So before we can get there, we got to teach how to see that data point. So we go to reach. So here we can see my impressions are up. This is for my Far Cry 1 video. I can see my impressions click-through rate is a little down, but the more impressions you get, the lower your click-through rate tends to go. That's just an average. So even though this is getting more impressions, this means how many times my video thumbnails are shown. This isn't on accident. I know exactly what happened. Far Cry 6, the latest game in the series, came out. Anytime that happens, people go back to look at the older games. So understanding with data what's happening is just as important as being able to read the data. So this isn't random. I know exactly what happened. It came out on October 7th. And sure enough, if we look here, people started looking back to the older videos. So then we go to impressions click-through rate. Here we can see the amount of impressions we've got over the last 90. I usually ask for the last 90 days. So when I ask you, I want to see the impressions, which is about 5.9 thousand here. Then the impressions click through rate. So when these, I'll round up and say 6,000 people saw this thumbnail, 12%, 12.3% click through, which led to about 1.8 thousand views. Of those views, we had 1.4K, which were brand new. So understanding this little graph will definitely help when it comes time to reviewing the thumbnails we're going to be taking a look at today. So once again, I need you to make sure whenever you send a video. So Driving with Miles is an opportunity. What video would you like me to take a look at its thumbnail for? Because when you do that, that gives me an opportunity to look at it. And I'm going to ask you, if you're getting a review today, to take the time, go to the last 90 days, let me know the number of impressions, its impressions click-through rate, and then from there, we can kind of see how it is performing, because from there, it's going to go from a little bit of my feelings on it, and then we're going to have data. So this is the call for everyone, that it is time for what thumbnails do you want me to review? How to show how to get to impressions click-through rate so we can really dive deep. But while we are waiting, if you're enjoying this live stream, please let me know in those live comments, as well as please consider sharing this out. I want to make sure that we're doing as much as possible to help as many people. While we're waiting for people to submit, which you can now actively do, I want to see what these poll results were. So, what is your average click through rate? I'm seeing here that at 2 to 4%, there was 2 to 4% click through rate had 29% of the audience polled, 4 to 6% had 33% of the audience polled, 6 to 10% was 29% of the audience that was polled, and 10% plus click through rate had 8%. So it looks like a majority of people are hovering, at least in this small poll, and that 4 to 6% range. And I definitely know what that's like. I think that it is super easy when it comes to YouTube thumbnails to be in that range, especially, but you have to remember, how are the different ways YouTube is sharing this thumbnail? Is this a video made primarily for search? Is this a video primarily made for the broader suggested? Because each of those different ideals will shape and influence how YouTube is going to try to find the right audience. And you have to remember that the way it works is people are searching for content. YouTube is going to give them many results. Will your result, will your video, will your thumbnail, will your title convince them to click through? If yes, YouTube will take note of that. With our analytics, we can see that. So as we're waiting for more people to just, come in, and if you would like a review, the time is now. But I want to show this again, maybe with another video, but maybe we can go deeper as we're waiting. So as you can see, my impressions click-through rate is down 2%, but it's overall pretty decently high at 12.3%. If I click on it and then go to see more, I can start seeing maybe where its traffic sources. Where is this coming from? So here's a great example. I have a pretty high click-through rate. You just submit by letting me know, Black Warrior Lures, the title of the video in chat. And then from there, I'll go to your channel and I'll check out the video. It's a great question. So just make sure you let me know the title of your video in chat. While I have it pulled up, you're just going to let me know the stats and I'll give you my initial thoughts on it before I know the data. So that is just where you go ahead and submit. So here I wanted to show just how this video is doing, right? So one of the things is YouTube in analytics will break down its impressions even further. So for me, this video has 5,940. So the first thing I'm taking a look at here is, where are my impressions coming from? So one of the things YouTube is doing is recommending this playlist. And as you can see here, to the 2,000 people who recommended it to, its click through rate is actually 31.2%. So, as I take a look here, a lot of people in this 2000, over a quarter of them click through when it comes to being suggested this video in a playlist. So, that is super important when it comes to it. Dewey Jones asks, do you use Google Cloud Vision to test thumbnails? What I take a look at is thumbnails when I'm testing them is I take a look at their performance. I used to work at TubeBuddy, so I use TubeBuddy's A/B test. And I also heavily monitor the first 48 hours of its performance. If I notice a substantial dip in those first 48, I usually will take it down just so that not take it down, but I'll change. But I always am trying to make sure that when it comes to just how YouTube is looking at it, I'm making sure I'm on top of it because sometimes I'll have a thumbnail that has a really good click through rate out of the gate, but that's just to my core subscribers. That's to the people that know me. After a while, it'll start falling off. So, what I usually tend to do is monitor those first 48 hours really heavily and then I keep an eye on it for those first 7 days. So, way you can do this is you have the options here. Obviously, this time range is not available because this is an older video. So, as I look here, if I look at the last 7 days, we can see that the playlist page, when YouTube recommends this playlist, it does really well, and YouTube's kept an eye on that. We can also see in browse, it's not doing that bad. So here in the last 7 days, we actually have a 15.3%. Although it is heavily being carried by my playlist because YouTube knows that people usually watch more than one video. So I like this from Richie Reed. Half the time, I think the notification bell don't work if you had the bell clicked. I used to think this way, but YouTube has actually given us a way to check. So if I go to a more modern video that may have this, if we go to engagement, it actually might be in reach or is it in audience? Yeah, it's in reach. YouTube actually, on average, tells us here, typical for our subscribers who have rung the bell is about 0.5 to 2.5%. I've seen this true on massive channels to be about 0.5 to 2.5. So this is on a common everyday upload. So I always say that people who ring the bell, it's not as high as people want it to be or think. And I feel that same pressure all the time. And even though I knew this video would do well, it's one of those situations where how I feel and how people react aren't always the same thing, and that's okay. But let's go ahead and break into our first review for the day. And I'm super excited for this. This one comes from Supplemental Seminary, who's given me a headphone recommendation. So the first thing I'm going to do is go here, type in here, and see the Atom Mini headphone output solution. Monitor audio on headphones in real time. They said it's at 9.8 for 90 days, but what are the amount of impressions? That's something I always ask. What are the impressions? So no, don't just tell me the click-through rate. What are the amount of impressions? Because right now, this seems to be a heavily based video on search. Because I use TubeBuddy, I can see here that for maybe this entire title, the search is low, but if I go into what I would look for at a mini headphone, right? This is where I want to see. This is probably the root keyword. And even here, the search is pretty poor. So, what are the number of impressions supplemental seminary for this? Because even for the root keyword, it is doing well, but I'm seeing some ways that we could probably change it just to make it a little bit better. In this video tutorial, I will show you a simple, inexpensive solution in order to monitor your audio in your headphones. So you have 12,000 984 impressions. That's not bad at all. For the views, that means that per night, per about 3 months, you're getting about, you know, 9.8%. So let's just round up to 10. You're getting about 1,200 views every 90 days. That's not bad, especially for a 10-month-old video. But one thing I would keep in mind is when it comes to this is I do think that this is a more search focused video. So if you go to your traffic sources, I'm curious what is your highest, because this is a very great example of a video that is, in my opinion, I would designate this as a search video. But one thing I keep in mind as well is when I look at this, right? Most of the time people are watching on their phones. So YouTube told me that about 50% on a 4K monitor is about how it would look like on a phone. I would be careful in here just taking a look. I think that, obviously you have a strong performing thumbnail in search. It is something to keep in mind. I love how this comment's like, "Tube buddy fired you." No, I left on my own volition. Anyway, when we look here, I want to make sure that when we're looking for search terms, that we're making sure that this is something that the white text, especially on this color, might be difficult. Obviously, if people are searching, they tend to read a little bit more. I'd say that the title isn't bad. It's heavily focused on that search, and this is clearly performing. But one thing I'd keep in mind when it comes to just this thumbnail is that the white text on it might be harder, especially from farther away. A simple solution can be just adding a little bit of a drop shadow, just making sure it stands out a little bit more. I am curious to see how you are targeting it in tags and such, but today we're just going to be focusing on pretty much the title and the thumbnail. One thing I like is that you have this here, no headphone jack, problem solved. You're using the text on this thumbnail to add emphasis. So, because of that, you're adding a lot of positive emphasis for exactly things people would search for. And YouTube actually told us when we were doing and learning is that a lot of people make the mistake of, instead of using the text to add emphasis, they are using the text to repeat the title and the thumbnail, and that's not necessarily needed. I love how you're using the text here. And Supplemental Seminary says, yes, it was created for search. And so that is something I'd keep in mind, because I think you're doing a good job there. Another thing I'd keep in mind is just like, take a look at this short little, this has an outline, which makes it a little bit easier to read. I think that the way you have this designed is pretty well. I'd say minor tweaks, but also keep in mind that because this is a search focused video, that it does have pretty poor search volume, but you are seeing a consistent amount of people search for it. As more people talk about it, more people will gain interest in it. So, that being said, I would make sure that you are doing everything you need to get there. Now, you did say that this is a common problem with the Atom Mini, which makes sense, especially because I'm sure a lot of people don't know about this when they buy the product. So maybe if this video is performing well for you, you find a way to do a follow up. Maybe you can offer, different ways into it if it makes sense to what you're trying to do on YouTube. Obviously, everything is different. Everyone has a different opinion, but I would say, looking here, find a way within these first 200 characters to include some of the keywords, because the only one you have now, and I'll zoom in just to make this a little bit more clear, is headphones. And the reason I bring this up, Dewey Jones asked, does the YouTube algorithm look at thumbnails? It looks at how the audience reacts to the thumbnail. So the reason we look at impressions click-through rates is to see how YouTube is seeing how the audience reacts. So for this one, we know that about 12,000, I'll round up just to make this a little easier, 13,000 in the last 90 days. It knows that it has about a 9.8% click-through rate, if I'm getting that correct. So I'll round up again, and 10%. So from there, we know that YouTube is looking at that data, and it's seeing that this video, especially in terms of search, is answering someone's searchable question, and then they're clicking through. So that is something I see here. I see from Roy, can YouTube detect the text in the thumbnails? YouTube isn't looking at it like that. I see the thing that YouTube told us is that it's looking at how people react to it. It can detect if a thumbnail obviously has like some negative things, and it does definitely look at thumbnails. But in terms of how YouTube is looking at it, and this comes from them directly, they're looking more at one, is there anything dangerous, something that'll get us in trouble, aka YouTube gets a massive scandal. And then they're looking at how is an audience responding to this. So when they're looking at this, they're wanting to make sure wherever you have positioned it, in this case, this one is a great example of a search based thumbnail and it's performing pretty well. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind is when you are doing a search based thumbnail, because this in general has a lower search volume, it may not get as many views as fast as something else, but shout outs to Nick Nimmin. Great to see. He says, sweet, caught you live. Nick, I know I haven't been able to get into Nimmin live in a while. It's just so early for me. So maybe eventually I can get back to a Nimmin live, but that is that is something that I need to definitely get my sleep schedule in order for. I see here from Seminary. Appreciate the help and review. Thinking of doubling down on this video, recreate and improve. Absolutely. And if there is a competitor to the Adam that maybe your audience is asked about or something you're curious about as a creator, that would be a natural head-to-head comparison. If you don't own it, maybe there's someone who does who's made a review so that you can say, hey, this is a great collaboration opportunity and we can definitely meet and do something together on this. You know, my fans want to know about this, your audience wants to know about this. Let's meet in the middle. I see that Driving with Miles says he misses Nick at Vid Summit. I just miss Nick in general. Hashtag Niminati, am I right? But in all seriousness, thank you so much, Supplemental Seminary, for the opportunity to take a look. I think you're doing a great job. Those minor tweaks, because it's already performing so well in search in that way, I definitely recommend just trying to think about finding ways to make the text a little bit more clear. But I think you're doing a good job. Another thing is maybe just to add emphasis, try just a red circle on the headphone jack in the image. Again, you can run an A/B test with tools such as TubeBuddy. You can also every night at midnight, which is a little harder. you can just change out the thumbnail manually. Of course, do whatever works for you. Highly recommend just experimenting, and I think doing another video would be a good idea. Now, with that said, I want to go ahead and see more of your titles, your thumbnails, and I want to see what their impressions are, their click-through rate. So if you'd like me to take a look, go ahead and enter it in the live chat. And if you're watching the replay, let me know what is the biggest tip you have picked up just by watching. Bubble Tea Kristen gave me a super sticker. Thank you so much. Very much appreciated. I see from Nick Nimmin says, I love that you're reviewing thumbs and titles instead of just looking at channels. Definitely. Thank you, Nick. This is something that I wanted to do because we can have some data submitted from the audience. And I think that this is important because I actually shout outs to Nick Nimmin, by the way, who YouTube definitely knows who they are. So I see Jason says, hey, Andrew, love to you. Look at mine. You need to give me the video title because otherwise I don't know what video specifically you want me to take a look at. So Jason would love to take a look at it. Just let me know the video title and then I'll ask a little bit more as we go on. So hopefully that helps. Will there be a point where YouTube face the most creators make will become stale and a joke? So that's actually an interesting question, Dewey Jones, because I heard from YouTube themselves that the YouTube face that people usually make fun of, those are the common misconception that YouTube told me when it comes to thumbnails is that faces do better. That is true that a face in the thumbnail can do better, but it is only half of the actual reality. Emotions with a human face or a face in general do well. And that's because we have been taught by just years of being alive on this planet how to react to social cues. And a YouTube face may be an over exaggeration of that social cue, but they really matter because we see it and we recognize it. Also, as a creator, there's only so many times I can be, and I think we all experience that. But the thing is, it works because that's how people have been hardwired to react. So that's something I'd keep in mind when it comes to the YouTube face. So, that being said, I also see Bubble Tea The Boba Queen has said that they love my In-N-Out shirt. Gotta represent. Just love the simplicity of In-N-Out. Great burgers. West Coast, best coast. It's coming from a guy born on the East Coast. Don't tell them that. But I see here from Black Warrior Lures, we have Worms Electric. Does it work? He also gave me a little bit of the stats. So why don't we go ahead and take that? And I just want to see. Click-through rate is 12.3%, really strong. But the impressions are a little low. So why don't we go ahead and take a look here? Worms Electric, does it work? Now, this is based on the last 90 days. It's got a 12.3% click through rate with 16.2 thousand impressions. That's pretty strong. The views are about 2.5 thousand, which makes sense for a search based thing. As I look here, the search volume is excellent according to the unweighted score. But if we click here, I'm going to go ahead and make this bigger, give you an idea into what I'm seeing. I want to see how this is looking. So, Worms Electric, does it work? I'm assuming Worms Electric. So Nick, I already went ahead and covered that earlier in the stream, but if I do need a quick recap in case anyone does, I don't think Nick does, but just that's a great call out. You can get to your impressions click through rate by clicking on your channel icon here, going on YouTube Studio. From here, clicking on whatever video you want to see the impressions click through rate on, you can go to content. I'll just choose a random video here. Let's just choose this one. Analytics. And then from here, you're going to go to reach. And that's how you can see your impressions click through rate. I've asked for the last 90 days. If your video doesn't have that, YouTube will give you as much information as it has. So this is a great example of that. You can also see this one has, first 24 hours. So Nick is talking more about traffic source. I did talk about that a little bit too, but you click on impressions click through rate here. Click on the see more. Then you click on traffic source. And then that's where you can definitely see the different traffic sources per thing. So for me in general, I have a high on my gaming channel because I've set up my playlist to be optimized. On average, any of my playlists, YouTube recommends for a game title. So it tends to have a higher click through rate. We actually saw this a little bit earlier when I was showing Far Cry 1, this being Far Cry 4. So going back to Black Warrior Lures here, aka, one of the best YouTubers, one of my favorites. Definitely have watched a lot of your content over the years, man. But that is how you can see those different things. Now, one thing I like is just YouTube's knowledge of, how they are doing the teaser. So if you look here, when you hover over, there's a different teaser. Take a look at how good YouTube, like the match of this is. It looks like when you hover over it, the thumbnail comes to life. That is something I got to ask YouTube about. How are you guys using those hover overs, right? So when it came to it, they said that those are actually people who are more likely to click. So if you can get someone to hover over it, that's actually a really good sign. Of course, that is pretty much on the desktop, but if you can even get someone to hover over and take a look, they're more likely to click if they like what's next. So, for example, this one, how to make ultimate electric worm getter. I mean, we're seeing worms that are matching this image, similar to what Damien has done here. Damon, not Damien. So, I look here, the data here is pretty strong for this thumbnail. You have 16.2 thousand impressions over the last 90 days. You have 2.3 thousand unique people coming. Now, when it comes to that impressions click through rate, how much of that is from search, Damien? Facebook invited me to an Apex tournament. I'm assuming the video. So looking here, I'm pretty impressed with what I'm seeing. But I also want to make sure that, if we're looking here, I want to look at the weighted score. So just see how, we're seeing here loading trend data. So there's not, it's high. Doesn't seem there's enough data here. This is a decent thumbnail. So what I would say is, as great as it is to look at good performing thumbnails, let's take a look at some thumbnails that you put a lot of work in, but when you look at the data, you're finding it's not performing as well because we've had two high performing thumbnails. So that means that it's doing a decent job in terms of how YouTube is looking at it now, but I want to see if there's a way we can get some of those other performing thumbnails to do a little bit better by just taking in a more honest look. And I think that's super important. I also think that when it comes to just in general, how 48.5% is search. Is that your click through rate in search in the last 90? Is that your click through rate? Because if so, that's almost 50%. My question would then be, what are the impressions from search there? I see Nick says small improvements for the win. Because if you're getting a 50%, like if you have, let's say, hypothetically 10,000 impressions and 50% of those non applicable for the last 90 or North America. Thank you so much, Dewey, for stopping on by. Definitely good to see you. I think you gave one earlier, so I'll give you value for the replay. So let's see if there. I can't scroll up that far. Wait, you lost me. So I was asking, what are the a number of impressions for that 48.5% click through in search? While you're figuring that out, let's go ahead and take another thumbnail. So I want to take a look at a thumbnail that may not be doing well and seeing where we can do it. So I see from Jason, he has a 21% click through rate. At that point, with the amount of impressions, which is 28.4 thousand, that just sounds like a good thumbnail that's performing. Or is it 4.7? Like you put 4.7% and click through rate 21%. Okay, so 4.7. There we are. Misunderstood that. So let me take a look at this now. So let's go ahead and make this maximized. Gonna go ahead and take off, go ahead and show off that comment a little bit more. So, first off, the authority to be ranked number one, great job there. So, you have said that this has gotten 28.4 thousand impressions, which means that when it comes to this, YouTube has shown it. My next question for you, Jason, would be go to the traffic sources. What are your highest traffic sources? Because when it's camera gear, especially, this is where you can really start seeing YouTube trying to suggest this to people that are interested in the camera. So, something to keep in mind. Hello, Betty. Great to see you. Saying happy to join. Happy to have you here with us. So, I would just be curious on breaking that down. One of the things I find interesting is you don't actually show the camera, you show the box, but I'm curious what your logic was there. You put new camera in text, which definitely does, emphasize the title. But I'm curious on your logic on not showing it, because if I were you, I'd run an A/B test, and this is a pretty simple one, of maybe just showing your new camera front and center, because you have a 4.7% click through rate. So I would say that's not bad at all. Aaron says something about seeing a video about a camera, not seeing the actual camera bugs me. I mean, at 4.7% click through rate, that's not terrible, but it is something that I'm curious the logic behind. So, browse has a 48.1% click through rate, notifications has 25.7. What are the number of impressions for each of those as well? Again, don't just tell me CTR, let me know impressions too. I was filming with the camera. So this is actually a great point. So you have the option, and this comes from YouTube themselves. You have the option to go back and make a million different thumbnails. So I would recommend, I understand at the time, just the simplicity of showing it. Take a second, refilm in the same location, assuming it's easy for you to do. Show the camera. Obviously, if it's the only camera you have, it probably might be, maybe it's not. But find a way to naturally show the camera. And I'm curious to see how that would do, because I mean, it's definitely performing. And if I take a look here, some of them don't have it, but some of them do. You are ranked number one. I would just do a test, see how that would go for you. Definitely take a look at the, 60-minute breakdown, 24-hour breakdown, see how people are reacting to it, because this is already getting some decent, you know, I mean, it's ranked number one for me, but obviously I'm logged in. That's a little biased. If I hover over here, It's interesting to see what it's previewing for the audience, where this one is previewing the camera itself. This one is also previewing the camera in a way. This one's previewing the photos. This one's also previewing the photos and someone talking with the camera. So I think it's really important to see what YouTube is trying to like highlight of if we hover over. Notice though that most of the time it tends to be the camera itself. So this also can be creating intrigue, right? Because everyone else is showing the camera, and because you're not, that's a way you're standing out. So that's something to keep in mind. I see from Betty love A/B tests. Just when you think you know it, it surprises you. However, some of my low CTR later pick up. I think this may happen because my audience might not be as interested right away. Also, Betty, you can take a look. A lot of times it's YouTube, maybe it's people coming from search later on in its lifestyle. So, or its life cycle, not style. So, if I look here, this video now, especially being 3 weeks old, it's definitely getting intrigue. I'm curious to see how it'll do long term. And that's where those A/B tests of showing maybe a strong emotion and a camera, right? So, if I were to give an example, right? Here's actually a little insight into my thinking. This is the new camera I plan to get. Switching to Sony cameras. Why I'm switching to Sony cameras from a Panasonic. Switching from Panasonic to Sony. I've done a little bit of insight and work into that to know that those are all things that are being searched. But how I do that, maybe I hold my old Panasonic camera in one hand and I show my Sony in the other, and I have a versus in the middle. Similar to just pointing at the box here. I think that this is unique because it's not showing it, but I also love how well lit you are. I think you have great lighting when I hover over. And if this is actually the camera you're using in the video, that's super strong. And Jason, so I think you're doing a good job here. So, how does YouTube reevaluate your video when it sees a new thumbnail? Betty, it's not reevaluating it. It's just going to be continuing to serve it to the people that are trying to find content around it. So, what it's going to do is it's going to keep serving it up to where you had it. So that's how I'd say. Woo, wow. From Black Warrior Lures. Oh, impressions click through rate on search was 5.9% over the last 90 days. Whew, 495,604 impressions. So if that's on search, where those impressions are coming from search, if that's almost 500,000 impressions from search, I would see if there are ways that you can improve that thumbnail, because what that shows me is there's so many people searching for it. And on search, I think it could do a little bit better, maybe just making the worms a little more clear. Obviously, for me, you're ranking number one, but I've watched your content before. So always look at how you're ranking in an incognito window to get the best accurate look as possible, because it's going to give you a different insight. I see this from Bubble Tea Kristen. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. I never know. How to make a vanilla milk tea at home using powder. So, this is what we're going to go ahead and take a look at now. Ranking number one. So, one thing I see is how to make a vanilla milk tea at home using powder. One, this is very interesting to me because as someone who just got a at-home boba kit because I am a boba enthusiast. Chris, then 10. You got it, Kristen. Again, some people it's Kirsten, even though it's spelled like Kristen, and I just don't want to mispronounce names if I can help it. But looking here, you know, how to make vanilla milk tea at home. You said that this has about 21,000 impressions, which is really good, but that click-through rate is 3.2%. That's kind of low. So it's getting a lot of unique viewers, but I'm concerned about that click-through rate. Now, one of the things I'm curious is, why is there not more focus on you and the drink? I see that you have the text, which definitely helps. You show the vanilla, you say home cafe, but I'm curious to why, this is just you smiling with it. So, one thing I'm looking at when I look at this here is like, if I want to see the drink, it's kind of here. And if I look at this, as YouTube says, on mobile at 50%, my question for the audience watching is, what do you notice the most? One thing YouTube also told me is there's a blink test they would do for a thumbnail. So look quickly at a thumbnail, blink, and what catches your eye? For me, it's the red and the blue. I barely notice the drink in you. So I'm curious to what people will say in the chat so we can get a little bit better of an idea. But for me, I see hard eyes from Kristen. For me, the thing I notice the most is the text over the drink. And I think that because you're telling people how to make this drink, it would be very important. Maybe you hold the boba in one hand and powder in another. And then, naturally you can put a circle around the powder. Again, emphasizing using powder, right? So you're teaching me how to make a vanilla milk tea at home using powder. Really, let's show that emphasis, making sure that we're having what the viewer is looking for here. Now, from Paul, he's saying the first thing he notices is the text, and it goes what I said. So again, the blink test, like, if I look at if I do that on the one that's a little bit further down, the first thing I look at is actually the background, and it keeps me looking broader. If I look here, I'm actually drawn to the red text. But here you are again. And I see that you have classic milk tea. You have another video about how to do it using powder, and you use powder here. So I'm just curious to why you're relying more on text than the drinks themselves. This is just a question. Because the thing is, if I'm looking for how to make a drink, I want to see the final result. And that's just me. But it's something to test around because at a click through rate that is about 3.2%, we can only go up from here. Hypothetically, of course, that's not necessarily true. A thumbnail click through rate can go down. But in terms of optimism, we hopefully create a thumbnail that goes up, not down. Just have to disclaim that if you make a change, your thumbnail click through rate may go down. Keep an eye on it. Don't just put it out there and not track it. That is just as bad as not changing it at all. As I get a little bit of water, I always tell Nick Nimmin to drink water, so I might as well follow my own advice and do it myself. But hopefully, this is giving you guys some ideas on how YouTube is looking at thumbnails, how you can take a deeper dive into thinking about them. One thing I also want to say that I'm noticing that Kristen is doing really well is including the target keyword. Now, notice how I said vanilla milk tea, but they've highlighted YouTube themselves bubble tea. How to make a vanilla milk tea at home using powder, because that is the target here. Maybe if I do some keyword research, vanilla milk tea. What are people looking for? Ingredients. Boba recipe. So there are, if I type in vanilla milk tea, you're also showing up here and you're again competing with these other things. So, Jason, what about thumbnails where I'm not in the thumb? Is that a no-no? I would say, how are people reacting to it? If they're reacting stronger, then that is something. And in fact, here, this is a great way for you to compare. I love this question because let's go back into analytics. I want to make this full size. We're going to get into group mode. And if you have not used group mode, it can change how you see things. So we're going to go back to your YouTube Studio dashboard, click on your account, click on YouTube Studio, go into analytics. From here, we're going back into that advanced mode, back into the driver's seat. And we're going to start creating a group. To do this, you're going to click apparently on one of my bookmarks. No. Well, thank you so much, Kristen, for the kind words. I do appreciate. You said you learned that trick from the best, Mr. Can. Well, I do appreciate that. I always say if I can, you can too, and hopefully that follows and reigns true. So, to your question, Jason, on what about thumbnails where you're not in the thumb, let's actually compare. Let's break this down. So, to do this, we're going to click on this search icon up here. Going to make this as clear as possible. And here's a great way I recommend doing this. Another thing you can do is use TubeBuddy, but here's how you can do it for free. Click here, go to groups, create a group. Now, I haven't done this on my gaming channel, but there are ways I could compare different groups of my videos, right? So let's say I wanted to see how all my Far Cry 4 videos are doing. I can add all of them into a group. And then I can call this Far Cry 4 videos, right? So now I've made a group. And let's say this group is all the ones where I don't have a face in it. So I can compare it to, I can compare it to a video. Let's say I'm comparing it to another video I've done. So I can make groups on anything, and so I can compare this group to how my channel has performed in general, right? And so this lets you compare thumb faces with no faces. If I wanted to do see how my audience is reacting to your point, Jason, I make a group, call it thumbnails with faces, make another group, call it thumbnails without faces, and then I think that is how you can compare because again, you want to make sure you're using that grouping feature smartly and intelligently and you are using your data. So that's how you can see because Jason, YouTube says on average faces do better, but that may not be true for how your audience is reacting. Or you might find out, dang, it really is true. I need to go back and fix those thumbnails without my face and put my beautiful face in it. So, Jason, that would be your own very beautiful face. Shout outs to Jason for being a good sport and letting me call him beautiful in front of live people. At the very least, you can no longer say no one's ever called you beautiful, Jason. So, that being said, can I make you a mod? Sunita, I don't know who you are. I only make mods for people I have worked with either in person or just know them for a long period of time. Shout outs to every mod. I think every mod in this chat I have met. Wait, how is Nick not a mod? What the heck? I need to make Nick a mod. That's my bad. I'm a, I'm a mod Nick's. Oh boy. Look, do as I say, not as I do. Making Nick a mod, not clickbait. But I also want to talk about titles. You know, this is a great opportunity, you know, for us to look back at some of these titles, right? How to make a vanilla milk tea at home using powder. One of the things I'd keep in mind when it comes to, you know, how things are in terms of titling, I always recommend that you take a look at what can I do to entice someone to maybe click more. So the reason I say that is that you want to find a way that would encourage someone to want to learn more about your video just on the title. I feel like titling is just as important. Now, you've made it searchable, Kristen. I think you've Oh, Kristen, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the $10 super sticker. It genuinely does mean a lot to me. Thank you so much for your support over the year. It has really meant a lot and if I can help you, which I hopefully am, like, that's what I hope to do with everyone, not just Kristen, but, you know, Kristen sent the super sticker, so I do appreciate it. But my goal is to try to help as many people with all the knowledge I've learned, and I was very fortunate enough to be in a call with YouTube and get to ask some questions and hear directly from them. Nick can tell you, any of our circle group, if you hear from YouTube at all, you latch onto it and you never let go. So, I just wanted to say thank you, and I just wanted to share this info because I think it's important. Back to the thumbnail. Now, oh, flash in your pan. Great to see you. Same with you, Insane McLean. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. But one thing I would say is, you know, we focused a lot on the thumbnail, which I think you've done some things where we can improve. But how to make vanilla milk tea at home using powder? Maybe a simple one is if this is an easy thing to do, how to easily make vanilla milk tea at home. Because if something is easy, ooh, I am I am definitely gonna try it. Since you've made multiple videos, maybe you could say best tasting powder, how to make a vanilla or how to make vanilla milk tea at home, best tasting powder. Again, you're talking about a powder. You can use an Amazon affiliate link to maybe recommend that powder you love. Obviously, don't do it just because you want money. Do it because you genuinely believe that is the best powder. So that's just something I would think of here too, because like if you can show me something's easy or it's the best, or milk tea powders to avoid. Hey, I want to make stuff at home. Oh, this one is bad. Oh, these ingredients will go bad quick. That's something I'm thinking of. Again, think about be an end user. What did you need to know when you were making the content? And hopefully that helps you. I see from Betty saying that I'm amazing. Thank you for helping us. I do my best. And again, thank you all for watching and continuing to support me no matter where I go. It genuinely means a lot. And, you know, I've gotten a lot of information over the years on YouTube, and it feels good to be able to share it with people. And I genuinely know that YouTube has changed my life. So if I can find a way to help you change yours with it, I want to do it. Tech Examined Great to see you here in the chat. Shout outs to you. That being said, I want to take a look at more titles and thumbnails. So send us your data. Let me know your input. We're going to look at it in the last 90 days. Look for thumbnails that can be improved, not necessarily those top performing thumbnails. Moonport Media, I got you. You have been very patient. I'm going to make sure that we take a look at yours now. And then I see Paul Peck. So we are going to go ahead and take a look at Moonpoint Media. Paul Peck, I got you too. So I'm looking here. You said right here, impressions, 49,000 impressions over the last 90 days. Click-through rate, 5.5%. Views, 4.2 thousand. So maybe we can find you here on this first page. If not, I might have to go a little bit more onto your channel, but that is fine too. So it looks like here that there is a very popular video. I don't know if this was something you were trying to kind of, you know, mimic or see how you can handle it. I see from Bubble Tea. So Moonport Media, is this you, Otter? Are you on another account? So if this is yours, oh, well, I guess good to see you on another account. So Facebook invited me to an Apex tournament. I do think that, you have here impressions are 49,000, your click-through rate is 5.5. What's the breakdown of traffic sources? Are those views coming from browse? Are they coming from search? Because if they're coming from browse, that can most of the time be your core audience. So I'm curious, where is it coming from? But looking here, you said that Facebook invited me to an Apex tournament. I definitely get the idea that Facebook, I see 50,000. Maybe you add in the amount. Facebook invited me to a $50,000 Apex tournament. Again, I'm like, whoa, a $50,000 tournament. Why did Facebook invite you? What is this tournament? So browse features has 62.6%, meaning that when that is pretty much that core audience taking a look here. Suggested 13.7%. Channel pages, meaning your YouTube channel, 9.2%. YouTube search is 3.0%. People may not be searching for this exactly, but that is something to keep in mind. I would say here that this is going to be one of those thumbnails where I think you did a good job of showing Facebook gaming $50,000. But if I don't have the title, right? And a lot of time on browse, especially now, YouTube is just showing the thumbnail. I don't necessarily know if I get the Facebook invited me. It kind of looks like you're paying $50,000 to Facebook. I'm not saying that is the intention, but this is just me reading it. So since a lot are coming from browse and you have that 5.5%, maybe if I know you, I'm more likely to click. But I don't necessarily get Apex from this. I get $50,000 in Facebook gaming, so I'm not exactly gathering what the title is just from the image. And that's fine, but it is just something to keep in mind and think of, because when I look here, you're getting a lot from browse, so making it a little bit more clear can help a lot. I see from Vaughn Sanders, hey Andrew, would love your opinion on my thumbnails. I'm gonna keep doing these kind of reviews. So when it comes time, just give me the title of the video's thumbnail you'd like me to look at. Let me know for the last 90 days, it's a number of impressions and its click-through rate. So that's pretty much all you got to do. Hopefully that helps answer that question there. And to you, Moonport Media, hopefully that gives you some things to think about, because again, you say that your browse feature is 62.6%. That's incredible. But it also has the new tag, and that's for people watching it now. So that's something I'd keep in mind. So Jason sees that one of his no face thumbnails only has a 1.9% click through rate. So Moonport Media, I think this is a good question. It says that's a good point for sure. Directing it more to Apex makes sense, but what about repeating what's in the title? Would adding $50,000 in the title be a bit redundant or still a good idea? So this goes into idea of what would entice someone to click, right? So Mr. Beast does this a lot. He's like the caveat for everyone. Even YouTube uses Mr. Beast as an example. And that was insane because I'm like, oh crap, even they use Mr. Beast. So Mr. Beast is clearly doing something right. But the reason I say that, right, is when people are looking up tournaments, maybe it makes no sense, but let's do some research together. Let's see what people are looking around Apex tournaments because maybe that's where we can find some ideas. So if I just go to Apex tournament, right? Apex tournament, highlights, live, match code, final circle, Apex tournament, Facebook, let's just type that in. You show up. So what I would say here is Apex tournament. The whole idea for $50,000 is that could be a reason is, oh, did he win the $50,000 prize pool? So that could be a reason why I would do it because again, you want to intrigue people. And because you've shown the $50,000 here, I think you do a good job. I would just say that when it comes to it, I like how it's Facebook invited me to an Apex tournament. Apex tournament is definitely searchable more so than maybe just Facebook invited me. So if I go to Apex tournament, right? Apex tournament, if there's a Facebook Apex tournament and there's a way that you can, Apex tournament, $50,000 prize pool from Facebook, like I see Twitch Rival right here. They put 50,000 again to just show. A lot of them include the money so far for the tournament because it's one of those, whoa, that's how much you potentially could win moments. And that's why people tend to do it. I'm not saying you have to, but I'm just trying to give you insight to why people do it. And usually it is because people are trying to, like, it's an interesting thing to know. And so that's my thought process on it. You don't have to follow my advice. It's just a recommendation. Doesn't mean you have to follow it. You always know your content better than I do. But, since we're trying to make it a little bit better, get more clicks, maybe we mention that. Because if people ever look up Apex tournament prize pools, $50,000 prize pool, whoa, Facebook invited you? And this comes from Paul Peck, an interesting point. Maybe outline to $50,000 with white to make it stand out a little bit more. That is a good thing. I'd also make sure that, like I said, it's a little more clear it's Apex. And again, you can always A B test. You can always go that deeper step because I think ultimately here that, you did really well with your core audience, excuse me, and the browse, but let's try to get outside of them and let's think of ways that YouTube could help us do just that. And that's why it's important to think not just as yourself, but what would someone who doesn't know think of this, right? I think you do a good job here, and I think that you've done something, you know, I think the text is amplifying. So, the simple text here is adding curiosity. It's clarifying some of it, like Facebook gaming, but I don't get that Apex tournament. So, again, just making sure. I do think you have an interesting perspective here. And I love how you're using the use of the line. So you're using a couple of combinations that I think can work together. I just make it a little bit more clear to that core audience you have. And that's just my 2 cents on it. Hopefully, you take a look at it and it does better. That's ultimately what I hope happens. But, take a look at those analytics, really look deep, and hopefully we will see those. The next one I have is from Paul Peck. So let's bring up Paul Peck. Drywall 2. Nobody does drywall like this guy. So Paul Peck says right here, step by step, CTR is 1.7% with 12. Is this in the last 90 days, Paul? 12.2 million percent? Whew. I see from Moonport Media. Thanks a lot. Really good insights. I'll be considering double dipping information in the future for sure. Haven't thought about it in that way before. Again, I always try to think of if I didn't know this content, right? What would interest me? Again, Mr. Beast does it with money a lot. Can they keep their hand on a boat for $50,000? How long can you keep your hand on a boat? Would you keep your hand on a boat for 24 hours for $50,000? I give someone $1 million to spend in a minute, right? Those are some of the ones he does. Facebook offered me $50,000 to compete in an Apex tournament. It's not inaccurate. It's click worthy because if you can honor that, that's definitely interesting. Facebook offered me $50,000, a chance of $50,000 to compete in an Apex tournament. That's definitely interesting. I'd be like, whoa, why did Facebook invite you? What is this Apex tournament? Paul, that, gosh, 12 people often tell me that no one is looking for their niche or their niche is too 12.2 million impressions is over the last 90 days. Now, Paul, let's go and look at your traffic source for that click through rate of 1.7%. What is your click through rate in search? Is that Moonport Media goes, that sounds really good, not gonna lie. Well, hey, hopefully I have at least given you some thoughts and some ideas. That's what I hope to do. Moonport Media is like, hmm, maybe. You don't have to do anything I say, but I hope it at least gives you some ways to think about things. Because, like, what intrigues you? What would you want to click on? Because sometimes I look at my thumbnails, I'm like, I wouldn't click on that. What was I thinking? Or I would click on it if I had more context. That's another way I think of things. So Paul here with his 12.2 million with an M impressions on the search is how to repair water damaged drywall ceiling. Step by step. Paul is a machine when it comes to that SEO. Immediately repeated, step by step. I'll show you how to cut the new piece of drywall, how to add a dot dot dot. But Paul has already gained so much authority here. Like Paul is just killing it here. But I think this is not a bad thumbnail, but maybe this could be as simple. I think I would just say maybe because if I look at it, right, like if I do the blink test, which is how I've been by doing a lot of the stuff. If we do that funnel blink test, and if I go far out, just kidding. My where I'm actually drawn to, Paul, in this image, if I do that blink test that YouTube recommends, I'm actually kind of drawn more to your shirt than the ceiling. And that's a good shirt. But it's something to keep in mind. CTR is 8.4% for search. That's not bad when you consider 12 million impressions. That's actually not bad at all. So it's that thing where you got to make sure you don't change a good thing because for that amount of impressions at 8.4%, whew, that's pretty good. But here's the thing, right? When I look at this, the thing I'm drawn to is your shirt. Just because when I do the blink test, I would see if I'm wondering, Paul, is this just a still from the video? I'm assuming yes, because if I hover over it, yeah, YouTube is trying to like show a different angle for it. It's interesting that YouTube is choosing to show you drilling into the ceiling, where in this one they're showing you like more actually, doing it like that. Ironically, the one where you have the drill in the thumbnail, no drill. The one where you don't have the drill in the thumbnail, drill. YouTube, why? So that's just something to keep in mind. I would say that at your search percent, where are those impressions coming from, Paul? Are those impressions all from search, those 12.2 million? Because that'll also help me know a little bit more context when it comes to it. Because if they're all from search, whoo. But if they're from browser or something, that gives us something to go. Beanie says the CTR has been pretty low recently. What I would do is make a group of your highest performing thumbs and do some of your most recent ones. Take a look at what the difference is in those groups and really see, hey, why are these so much lower? I see from Bubble Tea Kristen. Would it also be a good to have a similar logo or something similar for each thumbnail to tie them all together so see how many videos he has looks more authoritative? So it looks like Paul might be experimenting that with I Heart Drywall. I think when it comes to search based videos, one thing that I often tell people this is something YouTube even admitted to me because I asked them. I was like, "Hey, one, I need my hair light to just be a little bit more. No, I did not tell them, "Hey, where's my hair light?" Could you imagine? No, but I asked them, is it how important is like coherency between videos? And they said unless it's like a numbered series, most people don't necessarily for search-based content look for that continuation. So what I would say is that when it comes to like having a logo, what I've learned a lot of times for me, that was just for my own pride and like I liked how it looked, but a lot of times I got rid of the logo, made the image more interesting for the viewer, and the thumbnail did better, my video did better, and ultimately I was happier with the result. So what I would tell you is that it's nice if you can find a way to keep it uniform and things like that. That's great. But at the end of the day, I rather a video get clicked and views because people were interested in the thumbnails than they all look uniform and they have terrible click-through rate performance. So, I think that's how you kinda have to look at it. Now, most of the time, adding your logo doesn't mean anything to a viewer. It just doesn't. It means a if they're a fan, it means a lot. But if you're already in the thumbnail, like Paul is, or like you are, what does it add? Really? So that's how I kinda take a look at that. Suggested is 4.2 million impressions. Browse is 7.6 million impressions. So this is an interesting struggle you're at, Paul, because you have a good thumbnail for search, but where most of your impressions are from elsewhere. And so what I would say here is what are ways we could enhance this, right? Because I think in terms of search, you're killing it on the titling. I think you're doing a good job of showing it. Maybe in the video, there's a moment where you are maybe instead of in the left corner, you're in the back right. And we can, as silly as it is, sometimes adding a circle to a ceiling and an arrow, man, it is so frustrating to me to see how much other people can perform with as simple as that, but I've seen a thumbnail go from about a 4.3% like click through rate to a 10.8 with just a simple switch. And I was just blown away. But then I thought about it. If I'm a user, right? And I'm trying to learn how to repair a water damaged ceiling, like the step by step, maybe that is some text you try to add for emphasis. Arrows make a difference. My husband does that. I mean, it's one of those things where even YouTube recommends it just because of how frequently it works. Now, I'm not saying we remove Paul's beautiful face. In fact, I like Paul's beautiful face. Again, everyone's just beautiful today. Deal with it. I've never really see Paul's face much in his thumbnails. He's always small in the corner. Would be bigger in a thumb help possibly? I would test both ways. I would text with maybe Paul being larger, and I'd also test with just focusing on, you know, things like that. Neil, what the hell? I won't even remember you. Man, Neil, don't be a pick me. You're better than that. Anyway, I would definitely see either way. I think there are ways that Paul could experiment with here. I'd also maybe, you know, check and group and see how they would do because ultimately you want to get as many clicks as possible in any thumbnail we create and as any video. I don't think anyone said, aha, I made a video and it didn't do well. And if you do, interesting philosophy. So next we have Vaughn Sanders. So Christian's response to Will Smith and open marriage. That is what we're looking at. For starters, your click through rate is 6.8%, 842 impressions. I think it's an interesting thumbnail. If I do the blink test, I am immediately drawn to Will Smith. If we look at kind of like how people are doing it comparatively, similar kind of thumbnails. This one is using a meme. This one has Will a little bit our favorite circles and arrows. We have open marriage, we have close-ups. I would ultimately say that I think you're in a smart area. I'd be I would definitely maybe consider that Will Smith's open maybe it's Christian reacts to Will Smith's open marriage, because I think that the open marriage here, I don't know how easy this text would be to read from afar, and I know that reactions do very well, and if people are looking up Will Smith's open marriage, a lot of them are just pointing to Will, and I can definitely see Will very easily here, and I also see Jada as well. So what I would say here when it comes to it is make sure that it's super clear. Paul Peck, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. You didn't have to do that, but I do appreciate it, Paul. It does mean a lot. And Paul, if you ever need help, like I know Nick and I or any of the group would easily help you. I would definitely maybe start with some of your videos that may not be performing as well and start making groups of maybe thumbnails with you in it, circle text. I mean, there's so much you can do with analytics to just, things like that. And Urban Van Life, aka Neil, has a great point, which is the truth behind Will Smith's open marriage. That is that is a great title as well. Again, I know you're looking to make sure that it's very clear that it's a Christian perspective. So that I understand, just different ways to think about it. That's interesting. Yeah, and it is. I think that the thumbnail is actually pretty strong. I do think that this is a more recent, kind of bit of news. So so because of that reality, we have to be mindful of it too. So what I would say here is I think that what we have is pretty solid in terms of, a thumbnail design. I would maybe find a way to make them stand out a little bit more because I definitely think that, you know, some of the other ones, maybe even in an outline. I get the idea. Obviously, we don't want to complicate it too much, but I think that this is a great example of the text is emphasizing the thumbnail, which is, the open marriage question mark. Like this is really emphasizing the open marriage part. Obviously, it has Will Smith there. I would just be curious. And looking here, Christian Reacts actually has some wow. Look at that. It's got some good search. So maybe instead of Christian Response, we take a look at that. Christian Response. That's excellent too. I think Reacts is more YouTube focused and might help you get to that broader audience. So that's something I'd keep in mind here. I would also maybe create another version of this thumbnail. So urban van life, YouTube recommends if you're going to have text, make it be, emphasis. I think that the open marriage does add that emphasis. I think there could be other texts we used. Maybe it's like, is this right? Obviously, I'm not saying that's what you do, but just an idea. Like this one says pathetic, not saying you do that either, but it's just an idea to show how text can emphasize. What is wrong with them is another way text is emphasizing. So it's just another way to think of it. I hadn't thought of using Reacts. Yeah, Reacts definitely makes sense. Also, if we look here, I love the little snippet that it's showing. It's showing you, it's showing them. I think this is a great example of YouTube trying to find those best moments. Similarly here, curious to what they're showing there, but we're showing them again. I think ultimately you have a pretty decent thumbnail, but it's just ways to what would make people enticed to click on this. Ultimately, though, I think it's a really solid thumbnail, and I hope to see if we can make some slight changes to get that performance up. Neil says, Andrew Cano about to do a video of fitting CCTV to a van on the outside. What should my title be? Help me, sir. Um, I actually don't know. I just think it should be Paul Peck. Paul Peck, and on the TV it's Paul Peck. So honestly, it has to do It has nothing to do about the TV and everything to do about Paul Peck, because quite honestly, I don't think anyone would expect that. Putting Paul Peck on the side of my van, not clickbait. That would be a fun video for your core audience. Not sure about a general audience, but I would watch that. It's just a life-size Paul Peck sticker on the side of Neil's van. So ultimately, hopefully that helps. Von Sanders, cool, thanks. I've been steadily working to improve my thumbnails. And again, I think about titles as well. I think that titles and thumbnails are such an important combination that we need to think of them both. I know that a lot of times people focus on one over the other. So hopefully that helps. Paul Peck says yes. I'll tell you, if I was driving down the road and there's a van and it's Paul Peck, I think I'd appreciate that so much. Hopefully, Paul Peck is just an image of him outside the van, not trapped in the van, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But speaking of different conversations for a different day, consider subscribing to this channel, and thank you all so much for watching me live. I do live streams very frequently bi-weekly, so next week, maybe we can discuss something else differently together. Thank you all so much for the super chats, for the support, and your time. I'm Andrew Can, and if I can create better thumbnails using YouTube's data, then you can too.